Hey everyone, it's Kylie here. Welcome to Smart College Visits Campus Chat Live for Thursday, the 21st of May. It's been a big week in college admissions. Usually that doesn't really happen. It's a pretty steady thing, but this has been a big week. We've got a lot of AP tests fallout from the test on the 11th. And we've got the SAT stuff still coming up, and then Aunt Becky's going to jail, which I still think is pretty funny. But we have a special guest today, and I'm going to pop him in so he can say hi, and we will get to talking. This is Akil Bello. He is from sparetest.org, and I'm going to share that screen so you guys can check this out. And Akil, welcome to Campus Chat Live with Smart College Visit. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So give everybody a little bit of a background if they're not familiar with who you are and what SpareTest is and why we are so excited to have you here today.
Sure. Who I am? Well, I am a longtime testing person. I started off in test prep in 1990. I've taught and tutored every test you can imagine. I even ran my own test prep company for a while. Worked at a bunch of different organizations. Most recently, I'm at FairTest. I'm the director of advancement and advocacy. And so I'm somewhat of a testing expert. I know a lot about preparing for tests and dealing with standardized tests, especially as it relates to getting into school.
And so you have been working for a while to kind of make some changes in standardized testing. Everybody who goes to college, pretty much everybody has taken the SAT or the ACT. It's a rite of passage in many ways, but what's your mission about changing this? What's been your reason for making this different?
Well, I mean, I feel that anybody who's worked with the test for any length of time should come to understand that they're poorly used and misused. Right. In terms of when you think about things like cutoffs, which is actually against the advice of the test creators to use test cutoffs, because there's literally no difference between a 1,000 and a 1020, right? According to College Board, those are the same scores, but schools are awarding credit, schools are doing admissions decisions based on those kind of numbers. So, part of my work and part of what I've come to realize over the years is that these tests, even if what's on them is decent, and that's not always the case, but even if what's on them is decent, the way they use them is terrible. And so I want to stop the craziness like Florida giving teachers bonuses for SAT scores they got in high school. Like, that's just insane. That's complete. Amazon used SAT scores to help figure out where they were going to put their second warehouse. Like, let's just stop the crazy.
Yeah, because it's used as like a barometer of where pockets of, in many ways, privilege exist.
They pretend, so there's a pretense there. Using a test allows you to pretend you're talking about intelligence, right? But it ignores the fact that any tests can be prepared for, and standardized tests are actually more susceptible to preparation than anything else. Because they're standardized, I can figure out what to do and how to get a score up in the least amount of time possible, requiring the least amount of work possible. So they're more gameable kind of than any other thing that you could have.
Right.
So that's part of the problem in all of this. I think if it was scored on a 1 to 5 scale, which meant changes in score were really tough, these tests would be a whole lot better.
And the AP test does that. So you'd figure, why can't that reflect it? So yeah, and so much comes down to it, and so much of it is not transparent. As somebody who's worked in college admissions before, if colleges said, yes, we are using the SAT test, which you pay a company to administer, a third party to administer, and we're using it in this way, that would be one thing. But that doesn't happen. And so, as a mom and as a college admissions person, I've always found the SAT problematic. It is, and the other thing that not just the SAT, but the AP test, and we'll get into what's all going on right now. This is just our opinions right now. The other thing that I find again problematic is every admissions office in the states say we want to find out about you, the individual. we want to learn all about you and what makes you special and how your, specialness will bring more specialty to our campus. Go sit and take this test.
Yes.
and,
Yes.
and we're going to be judged along with everybody else in your room, in your grade, in your year. And to that just seems like a poor use of time.
I mean, that's part of the whole process, right? Is that
right?
That's part of also the problem is the tests have taken on a weight and an importance that don't reflect the information they give.
Right.
So
yeah.
And that's the real big thing.
I'm in agreement with you there. Now, what we have going on right now due to the coronavirus, which has kind of thrown the status quo of how these tests, at least the AP tests, we're getting to the SAT tests in a couple of weeks, months. AP tests were administered on May 11th. College Board says about 1% of students were unable to upload items or submit their answers, etc. If it's only 1%, it's a very vocal 1%. And so now there is a class action lawsuit that has been brought forward by these students. Just as a full clarification, Fair Test has actually been named as a plaintiff, has been asked as a plaintiff to help this case, which I think it's exciting for you. I'm sure it's exciting for Fair Test to probably getting a lot of press right now.
Yes, but it's a weird thing, right? It's a weird thing knowing that this was highly predictable. Everyone predicted it. We predicted it before, the minute they announced the changes. And a lot of the solutions that could have been implemented and I think that's the biggest concern here, right? Is the College Board did not seem to really pay close attention to who would be disadvantaged in what they're doing here and providing reasonable, fairly simple solutions and then taking responsibility for the problems. Even the 1% seems suspicious, right? Yeah, like either all of the 1% are all over the internet or College Board is fudging that number. Right. And I think that's part of the problem is that there's a large, again, even 1%, right? That means if they've tested 2 million kids, there's 20,000 who weren't able to, who had problems largely caused by College Board. Because College Board, their response was, oh, you had a browser mistake or you didn't use the right file format from your iPhone using the default picture. Saying, like, what tech person sets up a browser submission for photos and doesn't account for the default photo setting for an iPhone, the most popular.
It's basic IT. This is basic IT.
So there's some real basic IT stuff, browser versions, file formats they just didn't do, which sort of suggests that they said, we predict that 5% will fail, and we'll roll it out. Because some of their initial comments were like, oh, cool, it's only 1%. We thought it would be more. Right? And I have to find it so I can screenshot it. But there's a comment that essentially reads as, we expected it to be more, so the percentage that's having problems now is cool.
And these are students who have already been through so much this semester. The stress involved in taking these tests, these are people. And I would suspect the very vocal ones on Twitter, and viewers out there, please do yourself a favor. Go out on Twitter. There's some really smart kids.
There's some hysterical stuff.
They are making some really good points about how this could have been prevented, and that I don't know. Again, most of them are probably not part of the lawsuit, but they're going to make waves no matter where they end up.
It wasn't hard to predict when you say, as soon as we saw the nature of their platform, right? 10 people jumped online, and this is just looking at who's online with non-IT people saying, requiring everyone to take it at the same time around the world and to submit it in the same 5-minute window. There's going to be problems. There needs to be a backup plan. Because no, everything's fine. The
case for a rolling system would have actually probably reduced the number of faults that they had, because they would have been able to, on the fly, probably make changes. or at least say, you know what, this isn't working, guys. We're going to have to shut this down right now. We're going to figure this out. They would at least look like they were listening, as opposed to.
That's a big part of it, is that they really upset people where the default response for everything was, you have to take the makeup in a month. So you just did the test. We're just going to ignore everything you did. We're not going to try to fix it. Just do it again.
Yeah.
And that was the response to everyone. And then they got enough pressure after the first week that they finally allowed refunds. And then they also started, now they've created a secondary submission needs. But like, why wasn't this in place from the beginning?
Right.
These things were very, very predictable. There were problems that could have been accounted for in the very beginning, and they could have taken responsibility, right? They could have, at the very start, instead of threatening kids, and that's, if you haven't tracked down the dino sauce thing on Reddit, it's Reddit, so I warn you before you go in there.
Yeah, be careful. Be careful.
But it's pretty funny that, kids, because Trevor Packer is out there tweeting, we know you're cheating, we've watched you, we're coming for you, making threatening comments instead of helping alleviate the problems and the fear. He's threatening and scaring kids, right? And so there's all that mess. And so within all of the, one, there's the foreseeable problems. Two, there's the bad customer service. And three, there's the assumption that kids are going to cheat and treating them as, and treating children as cheaters, treating these students who aren't children, right? 16, 17, treating them as cheaters, essentially convicting them of pre-crime, which is what keeps coming back into my mind, right? This is Minority Report, and College Board has taken the role of the pre-crime division and like, oh, no, we know you're going to cheat. We're going to catch you now before you even do it.
Yeah, well, they assumed that those who were complaining were somehow in the wrong, and that was what was. These kids were ready. I mean, they had been, as an individual, as a mom and somebody who's watched kids go through this. None of those students went into this half-hearted. None of those students went into this with, well, I'm just going to see what happens. That's not why you take an AP test. So, you're proving yourself that you know this material and that, you can do this.
And even if they did, I mean, the point is they decided to take it in the midst of all this madness. It would seem that your job would be to try to support that and facilitate that as much as possible rather than treat everyone like criminals.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the concern.
And then that flows into, viewers, if you're not aware, the College Board not only does the testing for AP tests, but it also does the SAT, which is a much bigger deal. And as we were mentioning earlier about the SAT, it is going online. August is when it will be rolled out.
Not quite.
I believe, is it June?
No. So the SAT is not absolutely going online. We're not sure yet. So College Board has said that if schools don't open in the fall, they will introduce an online test. ACT is definitely planning to go online in the fall. So there won't be any online testing of SAT or ACT until the fall. But right now we're still waiting to see what happens with the June and July ACT, whether they're going to be canceled or not going to be canceled. There's still a September SAT that could still happen. So if there's enough fall testing capacity, then they're just going to stay. College Board will stay with the paper test. If there is not enough testing in the fall and there starts to be a lot of cancellations and stuff, then they're going to introduce the at-home test.
I can't think that isn't already being worked on. Let's just
it has to be, right?
It has to be.
The AP was the dry run for that, I would imagine.
Right? Exactly. And that failed, and now there's a lawsuit. So now trying to figure out how they would fix their problems, and spin that they're not fixing any problems because there were no problems. If the SAT does have to be online, the other side of the coin, though, is, and again, this is cracks in the machine. More and more schools are saying they're not going to require testing for the foreseeable future, or that this is how their dry run is going to be to get around standardized tests. And that's been something that Fair Test has been talking about for a while, like schools that do not require it.
Yes.
And now that seems to be taken off. So, yeah. I mean, do you see that going forward, that that they're going to keep it that way?
So what's been happening, so since 1968, I believe, is when the first school went test optional. So universities have decided for a long time that they're not going to use testing. The UC system actually started using the SATs in the 60s. So using, the test it hasn't been always done, right? So that's the first thing. People act like, oh my God, you're asking mothers to give birth without, I don't know. They're making it sound like there's a element of nature being changed.
Yeah,
right?
It's not a natural thing. Right. This can be done.
Right, it's a thing that has been done. So the test optional has really taken off in the last 10 years or so, especially the last 2 years. Even before the COVID thing happened, this was the busiest winter in test optional decisions. And prior to this, before the COVID stuff started, we had reached maybe 1,140 schools that were test optional in the country. And most of those schools were, so the vast majority of schools test optional simply means the student gets to choose whether to submit or not. There's 3 or 4 schools that are actually test blind, essentially meaning if you send us tests, we will come to your house and smack you upside the head and say, no, we ain't looking at them, right? And then there's a few.
You ruined it.
Right. Don't you dare send us a test. We're not looking at it no matter what you do. There's a few schools that were test flexible, which meant they gave you more than 2 choices as to what test to submit. What's happened since COVID is the number of schools that have said they're test optional, send them if you can, don't worry if you can't, has grown significantly. So in the last month or so, there have probably been 70 different announcements.
Yeah, and big schools too. These aren't little tier 3 schools. These are large state universities.
There have been a lot of schools running across the spectrum, and it's always been the case that there's been a fairly broad spectrum of schools. Wake Forest is it has been test optional for over a decade. There's always been a large number of schools that have been test optional. University of Chicago, right, #1 school.
Right.
I think it has the highest SAT average in the country. They went test optional 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So right now we're having an acceleration of announcements, some who are simply reacting to the COVID thing, but others who are introducing pilots because the COVID thing has accelerated the decisions and the conversations that were happening in their office anyway.
Right.
So you're going to see, there's a lot of flux right now, and applicants just need to be careful and check policies, check Fair Test's website. We've actually started listing the date we last updated it because we've had to update it so often.
Things are changing.
Elon it announced 2 days ago. So all these places are just announcing every day. There's another announcement or 3.
Right.
And one of the availability.
And it's a good thing. The one thing that I'm telling students as they're who are going into their senior year is, well, what do I do? What should I do? What I have told some students is, if you feel comfortable taking the SAT online, knowing that there could be issues, then do so.
Yeah.
If you feel prepared enough for it.
Right.
But to widen their net of colleges that they might be interested in significantly, because of gap year issues and enrollment targets and all of those things that still hasn't really shaken out. Right now, we don't know where that is.
The big thing for college admissions this year is really that. Oh, actually, hang on, because my Twitter feed is blowing up. I think California just passed the notion. So there was a motion in front of the regents of the University of California to remove SATs and ACTs from their admission criteria. It looks like that's going to happen. And so
breaking news right here on Smart College Visit.
University
crazy
in the country has just gone test optional, right? Which will be really, like, College Board has just lost, a third of their income. Or actually, I think it's 70% of test takers come from California. Yeah. So what does all of this mean for admission? I think that as students, as families looking to apply to college, what you have to realize is it has never been certain where you will end up at school. You have never been sure where you'll get in. No matter what someone told you, there was always surprises, and every year you heard about somebody who thought they were going to get in somewhere who did not get in. It has never been certain, and you're always playing the odds of, I think I have a chance of getting in there, and that chance is better than over there.
Right.
Those metrics, whatever you were using to think you had a chance at school X versus school Y, is less certain than it has ever been.
Right.
Right. But it's not unknowable. Also, it was never certain, so just accept that it wasn't certain, and we have to apply to multiple places because of the uncertainty. Don't buy into the crazy around you with people saying, "Oh my God, we don't know what's happening." Colleges are going to admit students. If you apply to a broad range of colleges, you will get in somewhere. Only about 80 colleges admit less than 25% of their students. Only about 200 admit less than 50%. There are over 2,000 colleges in the country. So you can find a very good school to get into, right? No matter what. The real questions are going to be, if you set your heart on one particular place, that's going to make it tougher.
Right. And we've got literally a pandemic going on.
Right.
We don't know the situation, and you're not going to know the situation of what that, the university that has spoken to your heart since you were a child. You don't know what's going on at their board of visitors meetings, their president's office.
You don't know if they're going to have classes in the fall. You don't know what anything's going to look like. So I think right now the biggest concern for students and families should be get through the pandemic without doubt. Right? Like that's really literally and sometimes I'm being hyperbolic, but right now I'm actually being literal. Let's get through it without dying. And for bonus points, let's try to do well in school. All great.
Whatever they're throwing at you, figure it out and pivot. It's the Ross Geller pivot. You're going to pivot. You're going to figure out how to do it.
And colleges are actually doing the same thing. They're for the most part going, we know things are crazy. Send us what you got. We will look at it and figure it out. Some colleges like Princeton came out and said, they didn't go test optional, but they came out and they said, we understand some of you are not going to be able to send multiple test scores. Got it. Right. So even though they're still requiring it, they tried to send out a message that says, don't go crazy trying to test multiple times. Right. So all the colleges are trying to play the game between, we still have to evaluate something, but we don't want you to put your life at risk to take another test.
Exactly.
Right. And I think that's the biggest thing students should be doing. Focus on your schoolwork, focus on being safe. If testing is available in person and you feel safe doing it, then great. I'm in New York City in the Bronx. There is no way I would let my child take any test until I don't know, I guess we got a vaccine, or every desk in every school has been hosed down with Clorox for a week straight, right? Because the Bronx is the biggest hotspot in the country. Right. So you have to consider.
We've had 66 total cases in my county.
Okay.
And this is Virginia Tech, is literally half a mile from me.
Right.
So, it's also just a different mindset in that admissions office than it's going to be at NYU.
Yes.
So, how is everyone functioning and working? And we're just stay healthy. That's mentally and physically. I mean, this is also a mental health point. And I was telling Akil before we came on that, I keep sort of going back to the hangover. Did you die? No, you didn't. Right. So find a little bit of room and big picture with this. If you, decide that you can't take the online SAT and it's only going to be online in the fall, then Fairtest has a huge list of schools that'll be just fine taking your application. And, there's going to be more of them before the end of before the end of the application.
There'll be more. Right.
There's going to be more, and it will change. College life. Everything about higher education is about to change.
Yes.
Big time.
Right.
So get used to the online thing. That's just going to be.
Lean
it's going to be the way it is.
Right. You're going to be you're going to be taking classes online. No matter where you go this fall, you will absolutely be taking classes online, and we just don't know how long it's going to last.
No.
And
this is going to be your college experience. It may not be, I'm in a stadium with 100,000 people.
Right.
But you are still going to get a quality education wherever you choose to go. Yep. They're going to figure out how to do it. and no one is going to, you don't need to feel cheated. So
Right.
it's going to be okay.
Everything's change.
Everything changes. So
right.
The only thing constant is, in fact, change. So the last thing I was going to say is, if you want to follow Akil on Twitter, which you totally should, because
that's not my actual Twitter handle, though. That's just
it's not. But this is great. But it's so good. Fine, I will. Right now, you are Virtuallnsanity, but your actual name is.
I don't know if they'll find me if they type in Virtuallnsanity. The @ is actually Akil Bello, just Akil Bello.
Yes.
Yeah.
So and I'm just
Virtuallnsanity will change pretty soon.
I don't know if maybe I'll snap it up from you if you get rid of it, because it's really good. And now I've had the Jamiroquai song in my head all week long.
Mission accomplished.
Since we've been talking about this. So
nice.
I want to thank you very much for coming on. I think we could probably talk about this for another half an hour, but there's only so much sexiness that college admissions can do for one day.
Yep.
So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And everybody check out Smart College Visit. We're going to have some content around this conversation. We have a whole coronavirus section on there about we have, what decisions your colleges are making, how to apply during this time, how if a gap year is right for you, what this means for the class of 2021. There's so much coming out. And eventually I will be doing some type of story about Aunt Becky. So if you didn't check that out today.
Awesome.
Because she's going to jail.
Going to jail.
Have a good evening, everybody. Thanks again, Akil.
Thanks for having me.
Have a good evening.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.